So I see it is exactly 7 o'clock. So I think it's fair enough to start cranking things up. And we've already had some good questions. But before we start, first, welcome. Nice to see you all here. And this will be the last of our courses in this go round. And I will be working on the recordings, probably tomorrow and Saturday morning. And it's certainly my plan to have them all available to you by the end of the weekend. Just have to go in and I'll cut out the breaks and, stuff like that. Let's just get started. Let's do it. So the questions, the first question was about monitor calibration. How important is it? How good a monitor do you need? And how often do I calibrate it? When I started doing the whole calibration thing, we're talking about, oh boy, I hate to say, probably about 15 years ago, maybe no longer than that, 18 years. And monitor calibration was extremely important because the electronics in monitors were nowhere near as sophisticated as they are now. And they would have a tendency to pretty quickly drift over time. So that was a problem. So you really, really needed to keep your monitor calibrated because any edit you do is based on what you see on your screen. So if your screen isn't correctly showing you the colors, how can you possibly expect the edit to be right? Now, if you're living in your own little closed world where the only way your images are ever being seen is by you on your computer, well, that's fine. That's a closed loop. But if you ever want to share an image, you ever want to make a print, then all bets are off. And if your monitor is pretty much the way it was out of the box, I mentioned this earlier, there's a good chance it's going to be too bright and slightly blue. The reason for that is because most monitors, most softwares now are geared towards people watching video content online. And video likes to be bright and it likes to be blue because it makes the whites look cleaner. Here's the however, though. We're doing stuff in Photoshop and Lightroom. If your monitor is bright and blue, you're going to edit based on what you see on the screen. But what we really want you to do is to edit based on what the actual data in the image is. And if your monitor brightness is up too high, well, again, it's okay when you're looking at it on your monitor. But if you go out to send it to print, the printer is going to print the file that is based on the data, not on what the monitor is doing it, because the monitor doesn't talk to the printer or it doesn't talk when you export a file. So if your monitor's set too bright, you're going to get dark prints. And the other side of that is if your monitor is too blue, again, which is a preference for video, what's going to happen is, what's the opposite of blue? Yellow. Your images, which look great on the screen, but your monitor's blue. So it's fixing a color issue for you already. When you go out to print, your prints are going to go towards the yellow. So yellow dull prints is the worst case scenario if your monitor's too bright and too blue. So you don't want to have that happen. I do use what used to be X-Rite. Now it's Calibrate. They're little. I have both the spectrophotometer that can create custom printer profiles. I also have the colorimeter, which has been many names. The Color Monkey, the what's i1 Studio now. Actually, I have the box right behind me in my shelf. I'll take a look at it when we take a break. But definitely do this because any monitor is not going to be right coming out of the box. And when you have your monitor right, then you know that the stuff you're seeing on the screen, your monitor's showing it to the best of its ability. So now let's talk about best of the ability of your monitor. If you have a monitor that's $149 from Elmart, then was it Elmart? Elmart from Evil Dead? Versus a $800 or $1,000 monitor, is there a difference? Well, yeah, obviously there is. However, if you calibrate your monitor and you have a decent monitor, and really decent monitors at this point, you can get really good results with a $300 monitor. They have gotten remarkably good. Do they have quite the angle of view as a monitor that's $849? For example, I've got these two LG monitors, and I think they were, what, $349, something like that. And they're wonderful once they're calibrated. Next to that, on my other side, I have an AZO monitor, which when it was new was $1,700. An AZO monitor is like the Rolls Royce of monitors. Again, once they're calibrated, I can take images from one to the other, and they're pretty close. Is the AZO a little bit better? Yes, it is. Here's the other, however, though, is the difference I see on the AZO versus I see on my LGs going to translate to a print, because you lose a lot when you go out to print. And my experience has been not enough that I can really tell. So as long as everything's calibrated, when you have a calibrated monitor, what that means is happening is that the monitor is showing you the colors on the screen to the best of its ability. Now, there are different color spaces. And actually, you know what? Let me bring something up on the screen for you. I'll just show you something real. Oh, I hate when they move things. Let's see. Where is it now? I don't even remember. Where did they hide it? I might have to go look for it when we take a break. There's an app on in Apple where you can see profiles. And they moved everything recently, so forget it. I'll do it after we take our break halfway, because remind me, I'll talk about profiles and color spaces and how they work together. It's not that important to know, though. The basic thing is, if there's one thing you can do to make your edits better, it's have your monitor calibrated. And yeah, there are $150 or so. It's a worthwhile investment, but I'm going to guess that many of you belong to some sort of camera club or a camera group. And if that's the case, get the group to buy one. The software is free. You can all have it on your computers. You only need to do this thing once every 3 months. Take it home for the evening and calibrate your monitors, and you'll be good to go for 3 months. And it's really, again, we're talking $150 for the entire group. What else about monitors? All right, Photoshop in particular, some mechanical. And by the way, just any questions, just keep asking in the chat room about specific monitors. If I didn't answer your question, I'm happy to go there. Here's something else that came up. I think it was Vicky who asked, and she noticed something really annoying. And she's right. And that's when you start using Photoshop, especially every time the thing upgrades, which has been frequently as of late, it wants to save to the cloud rather than to your computer, which to me is the most annoying thing. So what are the advantages to saving into the cloud? Well, the one nice thing is, if you're dealing with your images on the cloud, any of your devices can get to them anytime you have a connection. So if you do editing on your phone and on your iPad and on your computer and your laptop, yes, you can do it on the cloud. And then when you go to your other device, the edits and everything will be there. I don't think most photographers work that way. I certainly don't. I have a certain amount of my stuff backed up on the cloud. Why? Because it can. Do I ever go to them? No, it's just an extra safety thing. But all of my images are saved locally. I don't deal with the cloud at all as far as my image edits go. If I need to travel, I have an external hard drive with its own Lightroom catalog on it. And that's where all my images go when I travel. When I get home, I plug that into my desktop machine here and then just transfer everything in. I can just do it's basically in Lightroom. There's a thing called import from another catalog, and I'll just do that import and transfer them over to my main image drives. How do you get rid of this annoyance? All right. By the way, you might notice under Photoshop, it no longer says preferences, which I find interesting. They decided to change the word to settings. And it's over here under file handling. And if you open this up, look at this. Look at the default file location for file handling, Creative Cloud. Stop it. Now, why are they doing this? Well, they'll say they want you to be able to have access to all your images wherever you go. That's not their motivation. Their motivation is you have to pay for Creative Cloud storage above a little bit amount. So it's a revenue stream. That's why they want to do it. So the answer is no. You don't get to store it in the Creative Cloud. Just put it on my computer and stop it. Stop changing this every time there's an upgrade on the damn thing. Any other things you want to do? Yes, save as to original folder. That's fine. File compatibility. Let's see, prefer Adobe Camera Raw for supported RAW files, whatever. Not really. I'm going to use Lightroom for that. The rest of this stuff, no. Ask before saving layer TIFFs. No, always do it. Disable compression. No, don't. Leave them uncompressed. Just don't check any of these. The only one you want to make sure you change here is your default file location. If you want them in the cloud, fine. But otherwise, tell them on the computer. There's also something that I find really annoying, and that's when you go up to save and you have save, save as, save a copy. Really? Is that necessary? How about just save as? And you can do that right here. It's called Enable Legacy Save As. Yeah. So the word copy won't appear anymore. Yeah, that's nice. Don't show me that again. And I hit OK. So now when I go to save as, and I click on the options here, I get JPEGs back. Where if you don't have this checked, you have to go to save a copy in order to save a JPEG. I create JPEGs all the time. Everything that gets uploaded to my newsletter has to be a JPEG. And most of the stuff that I'm sending out to the lab, if it's a photo print, needs to be a JPEG. So I don't have to save this copy nonsense. If you choose that legacy save as, you get all your file types right in the menu again. So I don't need to save this right now, but I find that annoying. All right. Any other questions about monitors and saving stuff? No? Yes. Type it in, or you can unmute yourself if you want. Nope, not hearing you. All right, Vicky, you're not here. You're still muted, Vicky. So if you just type it in the chat, and then I will continue on and I will answer your question when it shows up. So one other thing I wanted to talk about in here that's really important is the difference between, oh, I have to unmute, huh? Can you unmute her, hon, Di? Is the difference between image size, canvas size, etc. So, all right, you got her question? Oh, you're Vicky, you're live. Okay, go ahead. Nope, it's still.
There we go. I got it.
There we go. She got it.
If you could do one thing and go up to the little house on the home. One of my questions was, what's the difference between home and your files? So yeah, so there's two different places. My question was, are these both in the cloud? And why does sometimes it's saving, if I want to save a photo that I might want to go back and edit again, I don't want it as a JPEG. I might want it in the cloud being saved there, but I don't know what the difference is between the home files and the your files. And some of them are saved as PSDCs and some of them are saved as TIFFs.
Yep, it's a good question. And I have an answer you're not going to like. I have no idea. I don't use it. I only save at home. That's the only place I ever put my files. So I'll tell you what, I will look into that though, see if there's.
And these are all, and I guess half of yours are TIFFs and half of them are PSDs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And some of them are RAWs, like here's a RAW file. We see the RW2. So generally, and here's a RAW file.
Yeah.
So yeah, all my stuff is, I don't generally save, you won't see JPEGs in my edit here.
Right.
Where you're going to see JPEGs is I export JPEGs, but I generally don't edit them. So anything I edit is going to be a TIFF or a PSD or a RAW to start.
Can you tell the difference between a TIFF and a PSD? I don't know what the difference is.
It's a file saving thing. It's behind the scenes, how the data is saved. I could explain it to you, but it's not important. And if I tell you and you remember it, you will forget people's birthdays. Okay. Because there won't be any more room to remember things. It's just not something to concern yourself with. A TIFF or a PSD, the bottom real answer is it doesn't matter. Who cares?
And these files in your home section are sitting in the cloud?
No. Correct? None of my files are on the cloud. These are all on my computer.
So then my question is, when I hit save and it goes here, I haven't put them on my computer, so it must be finding someplace on the computer.
Sure, that all comes from this file handling settings. Okay. If you want them to be in the cloud, you change this to Creative Cloud. but I don't like that. All of my images are saved locally.
I'm the opposite,
Okay.
because I use the regular Lightroom. I don't use Classic.
Okay. You
I'm
know,
paying
well,
for
the
the cloud,
classic.
I'm gonna
All
use
right. So them's fighting words.
I know.
Lightroom Classic is the regular one. The new Lightroom, which is actually called in Adobe Lightroom Mobile, is really designed for iPhone photography, not for
Yeah,
heavy duty editing.
they're
So
just calling it Lightroom now.
yeah, well, if you
They
look
shouldn't, but I
when
don't know
they
why they don't call it Lightroom Creative Cloud. So it would
yeah,
all be
well,
clear.
that's because the guys who used to work at Coke and decided to come with Coke Classic and New Coke, when after they got fired, they went to work for Adobe. Naming things, yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to muting everybody. All right. Okay, so let's talk about image size, canvas size, that kind of stuff. So, all right, I have this image as a certain size. I still, by the way, love this image. I have to have a print of this. If I go up to image, there's these two things here, image size and canvas size. So let's take a look at image size. And image size shows us the dimensions of the image at a particular resolution. So if I wanted to either export or print this at 240 dots per inch, it tells me, well, it would be a 26 by 15.467 inch print. Well, that's not particularly helpful. Now it's so close to being 16. If I stretch this thing vertically to 16, would it hurt anything? Really? Probably not. There's also this resample button, meaning that if you change, if you change any of these sizes, do you want the software to resample it to that new size so that the resolution stays the same? For example, if I decided I just wanted a 4x6 of this and I hit 6 in width, oops, I had unclicked my my link there. If I hit 6, notice now it's 6 by 3.5 or so, but now the file size just went from 132 megs to 7 megs because it shrunk it down and it resampled it, meaning it just made it the same 240 dots per inch, but at 6 inches instead of 26 inches. So let's undo that. Now, if I want to resize and not resample, let's say I want it to be, 12 inches. So if I type 12 here, notice now the resolution says, fine, if you send it out as a 7 by 12, it's going to be 520 dots per inch. Conversely, let's say, let's put it back to our 240 here. Oh, and I turn off resample and see it goes back to 26. Let's say I wanted a 50-inch print out of this. So if I tell it 50, now notice it's 30 by 50 at 124.8 dots per inch or pixels per inch. So that's fine. I could actually print this. However, if I undo this and turn on resample and tell it, all right, I want a 50-inch print. Now look what happened. The image is being resized up in Photoshop, and we would have to tell it one of these ways, which is the best way to do it. Now, Adobe says, according to here, that if you're going to enlarge, either preserve details or bicubic smoother are better. Now, there are new filters in Photoshop, by the way, that will do this. There's also filters in softwares like Topaz that will allow you to resize an image giant with other technology. However, Photoshop now has it too, and I'll show you that in just a second. Let's just put this. So here's how big the file is right now. We'll come back to this. Let's just hit OK. Yes, question.
Frank has a couple of questions, but the one related to this is why 240 versus 300?
Oh, okay. So Frank asked why 240 instead of 300. All right. We had this I thought we had this conversation last night, but everything flows together for me because I taught a workshop this weekend and I might have told them instead. So let's go over it again. All right, where does this 240 thing come from? Because that is the standard resolution for all things Adobe. Most people, especially people who have been doing this a long time, they kept hearing 300. It was just coming from everywhere, and it was meaningless. It didn't mean anything. Where does 300 come from? All right, little historical note here. I used to be an art director at an advertising agency in Princeton, New Jersey. So I was all in on pre-press and all of that kind of stuff. 300 DPI was requested for printing because when anything went out to print, they wanted twice the line screen, which is how things were printed then, so that they could make an image bigger. If it's a really cool image, maybe they'd want to make it across two pages, or if they just wanted to crop a piece, they'd take a piece and they wanted to enlarge it. Magazines were all printed at something called 150 line screen. For all intents and purposes, the same as 150 dots per inch or lines per inch. But they always asked for 300, so they had flexibility to move things around. Well, a lot of printer drivers, particularly photo printers, when they became popular, were built around having a 300 DPI interface. It's how they worked the math in the printer. Did the printer really care? No. Did prints really look different? Well, certainly not nowadays. And what I would challenge you with, and if I was with you, I could prove it to you in person. What resolution can you actually see? Can you see the difference between 300 and 240? Well, here's the surprise. With the naked eye, meaning not a magnifying glass, none of you, I would challenge you, none of you can see the difference between 300 and 125 dots per inch on a print. And I've tested this and I've shown it to people when I do printing workshops, and I'll put out samples. I have this test I do with 2 different images, a portrait and a landscape, that I print at 300, 240, 180, 150, 125, and 100. So I've got 6 prints of these 2 images, and I put them out on the table, and I give people a piece of paper. Say, all right, I want you to tell me the lowest resolution one and the highest resolution one, and they're labeled with just random letters. You can see 100 DPI. At 100 DPI, things get a little bit soft in some spots, but at 125 and up, you can't see the difference. And while some people will get the 100 for the low, I have had an equal number of people pick the 125 DPI as the highest resolution as the 300. So the bottom line is you can't see it. Where does 240 come from? 240 comes from Epson. Adobe went to Epson and they were on good terms and asked, what's the highest resolution that your inkjet printers can actually print? Not the pixel numbers on the printers. That doesn't mean anything. The actual pixels per inch that the image can hold. And Epson came back and said, well, on our glossy stock, you can hold 240 dots per inch. Are some printers set for 300? Yeah. But what happens is when the ink hits the paper, there's a little bit of bleed. It moves a little bit when it moves, it hits the paper. And by the way, as another side, before I worked at the ad agency, I was a chemist and I worked for Union Camp, a paper company, working on research for coatings for paper to keep the ink from moving. So who knows? Who knew I'd end up here? But anyway, so the ink moves a little bit and it moves differently depending on the paper coating. So glossy stock moves the least, but Epson still said glossy stock 240 DPI is after that you really can't see any difference. On a luster paper, that number goes down because now there's a little bit of tooth in the paper. Go to a matte paper, like a fine art paper, watercolor paper, something like that, and that number drops down to about 170 dots per inch is all the paper can really differentiate. And if any of you have ever had a canvas print done, guess what canvas prints are printed at? Canvas prints are all printed at 150 dots per inch. That's how the printers are set up. Why? Because the canvas interferes with you being able to see any details. And it doesn't look any different at 150 versus 300 DPI. So the answer is glossy paper 240, luster paper 170, 180, matte paper 170 to 150, depends on the paper. Realistically, the test that I did, I printed it out. I had them all printed on luster paper, not a full gloss, not a matte, kind of in between. And no one could tell the difference between 125 and 300 DPI or any of the ones in between. All right. Did I answer the question? I think I did. Anything else? That was Frank. Anything else from Frank?
Yeah.
Frank, did I answer your question? And you might not believe me. Okay, Frank said, yes, I did.
He couldn't find, he had his preferences open, but couldn't find the cloud checkbox.
Okay, so if any of you are going to be in Florida for the Florida Birding and Photo Fest, which by the way, which I talk about in tomorrow's newsletter, by the way, it's no longer it's birding festival. Yes, there's a bunch of bird stuff that goes on. It is equally landscape, even portrait image processing, you name it, it's there. It's a great event. And iPhone photography that is being taught by the one and only lovely Diane. So she's teaching at the conference this year. But I am also teaching a print workshop while I'm there, and I will bring those prints for anybody that doesn't believe me, and I will prove them wrong. Okay. So we got that answered. So let me just hit cancel on here. Now let's go look. Okay. So someone asked, I need to submit a photo to a club and have to have a length of 2000 pixels, and it has to be 2 megabytes or less. Okay. Well, you're at a JPEG. So let's say I had to send this out to a club and it had to be 2000 pixels wide. So I come up to image size. And by the way, this is easier to do in Lightroom than it is in Photoshop, just so you know. So what I do is I'll come up here and I'll change inches to pixels. And you can see this is 6,240 pixels. And I will change it to 2000. And I will have it resample because it's going to be smaller. So now you can see the file is 13.6 megs, was 132. There's a however here. If you look over here, I've got 5 layers in this image, which is greatly increasing it. And also this number is uncompressed. When you save this as a JPEG, the file will be much smaller. Unfortunately, Photoshop does not tell you. The beauty of Lightroom is you'll see it as you're doing it. So if you do your export from Lightroom and just say, give me a 2000 pixel wide image, you can then set the quality level. And typically 9 or 10 is what you'd send over. And then your images at 2000 pixels will all be under 2 megs. So you can do it in Photoshop, but it's far easier in Lightroom. In fact, we're going to go into Lightroom first to get some of our other images. So while we're there, I'll show you where the export is in Lightroom, and it just makes it a lot easier. So let's cancel that. All right, let's take a look at, we looked at image size. We see how big this file is. That's fine. Let's take a look at canvas size. So canvas size, well, it just shows us our pixel dimensions. Why would we care? Well, maybe I want to add to it. However, does anyone know how many pixels they want? Well, I could go to inches and I see it's 26 by 15.467. Well, how much, typically when you want to change a canvas size, you either want to crop or you want to add some space to the image. There's an easier way to do this. So let's hit cancel here. One of the beauties of cropping in Photoshop is that you can crop in or out. You can actually do what's called a reverse crop. So if I hit the crop tool, first of all, I've got ratios, and you can have all this width and height by resolution. By the way, if you start messing with width by height by resolution, I guarantee you're going to get a headache. It's going to be a mess. You're better off just picking the ratio. So if you know, I was setting this up for my legal size printer, which is 14 by 8.5. So it shows me a 14 by 8.5 crop. I can make it bigger. Let's say I want to have extra room. I was thinking, well, you know what? The pump here is a little close to the edge. I could use a little bit more room over here. What can I do to get it? So if I hit enter, I now have a reverse crop with more space on the side. So why would I want to do that? Also, I know that this new crop is exactly 14 by 8.5. I don't care about resolution at this point. I know it's exactly the shape for my mats and my printer when I print out legal. So I'm going to show you something that you could do with this. We're going to go into a Photoshop edit for a second here. So I've got these other layers that I was playing around with. But these two on the bottom, I'm interested in. So the second layer is when I added the pump. See, there's the pump put back in. I need to flatten these, but I want to keep all my layers for the time being. So I'm going to come up to the layer menu, these 3 lines, click on it, hold down Alt. Remember, Alt is the magic key Adobe. It does all kinds of cool stuff, but this doesn't tell you anything. Nothing happens on the screen to let you know you're pressing Alt. But when I hit merge visible, I now get a flattened version of those 2 layers, but I still have all my other layers. This is the one I want to mess with. So I'm going to get the marquee tool and I'm going to select this part of the image and go to File, Edit, Content Aware Scale. I'm holding in the Shift key and I'm going to drag this out, and look, it does a beautiful job of stretching that. I now have a little bit more room on the one side of the image so that the thing doesn't feel too cramped. One of the duties I had during this conference I spoke at this past weekend was I had to do print competition judging. Something we all do, and we were all guilty of it, is we have a tendency to put things that are subjects. In this case, there are multiple subjects. We have the wood here, we've got the gas pump, and we have the mountain. We've got a rule of odds here. We've got the 3 things. However, the gas pump was a little too close to the edge. And when you do that, it makes your photos look sort of, what's the word? Claustrophobic. It looks like it's in a box and it doesn't have any room to breathe. This is a way to add some more room with an existing image. I'm going to do the same thing on the right side of the image. I'm going to pick up, let's see what happens if I pick up this much. And again, go to Edit Content Aware Scale. Again, hold down the Shift key, because if you don't, then the whole thing goes bigger or smaller, which isn't going to help you. Hold down Shift, and I'm going to drag this one off to the right, and that little bit of stretching is just fine. And the image is looking better. Now, up on the top, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to scale it, or do I want to try to do content-aware fill? I think I need to scale this as well. I'm even going to pick up the top of the tree, because remember, it's called content aware scale. It knows, it sees what it is in the image, what it's going to move. How it knows, I have no idea. But hold down the Shift key again, and I'm going to bring that up. And notice the top of the tree didn't move. How do they do this? They're just very clever. Now the bottom, I need more room. I need more grass underneath this board. If I do a content aware scale, it's going to take this thing with it. Well, for this, I'm going to need to do I'm going to do this selection. Whoops, no pixels are selected. Oh, why are there no pixels selected? Let's try that again. Let's deselect. Okay, there's my selection. I'm going to try to use content aware fill here just by picking up some of the grass. And what Photoshop comes in and does is it says, okay, I'm going to sample from these places. And over here, it shows me a preview of what it's going to do. I see problems, but it still does a pretty good job. So I'm going to hit OK and deselect. And look what it did. It added more grass underneath. The composition of the image is better now. It doesn't feel so claustrophobic. However, I've got some repeating patterns. You can see them as we zoom in. As good as they look, you can see that's not too bad. Right here, you can see a little bit of repeating. But if you really want to see repeating patterns, you actually have to back off, not zoom in. And now you can see it. You see the grass, grass, grass. Right in here, you can see it. Too much, too zoomed, sorry. Okay, you see grass, 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 grass. The same grass blades are bending in exactly the same way. And again, as I mentioned, you can see this better if you back off. So I'm going to back off a little bit, and I'm just going to paint over top of this. Now, it did this on another layer. So I'm going to take these two, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control E, which will just merge those layers that I have selected. Now I need my stamp tool. So I'm going to get the stamp tool. I'm going to just work at 100%. And again, if you guys remember, yes, I know I didn't click it yet. Hold down Alt to fill the brush. So I need to pick up some spots, some places that are going to break this up a bit. I'm just going to pick up in here a random spot, and I'm going to come in here and just add some stuff, just kind of randomly along the bottom, because that's where the repeating patterns happened over here a little bit as well, and over in here. So, let's share from each of them. I'm going to sample in here and just come along the bottom to break that up. And I'm going to bring this in here to break up that black a little bit. Everywhere else looks pretty good. I'm not, this was probably here. I'm going to fix it anyway. Let's go ahead and put some more grass in there. All right. So let's go ahead and now we can go ahead and zoom in and see if we see any artifacts. And I'm not seeing any. Again, we're looking at this really zoomed in, much bigger than a print would ever be. And if it looks good at 100% there, you're really good. So that was pretty cool, because we were able to do is take this image, and by adding that stretch, no, I forgot I had hit the gas pump. We gave the image a little bit more room left and right so that things don't look quite as claustrophobic. But we're not done. Let's back off again. So as I look at the image, what are the problems? Well, one, I think the saturation is actually maybe a little too high. Also, where do you look? Well, you see this grass out here? See how bright that is? Yeah, it might have been that bright, but that needs to come down as well. So let's start off by just bringing the overall saturation down a little bit. And I will do that by clicking down here, and these are the adjustment layers. So let's click Hue and Saturation, and I'm going to just bring it down a little. Not a lot, just enough to take some of the kind of supernatural heat of it off. Just something like that is fine. Now, I still don't like the sky. I think the sky is the blue's a little off. I think it's a little too saturated. So let's select the sky. And if we go back to our layer 2 copy, which is a mix of everything, I can come up to select sky, just like we did when we were in Lightroom. And it will select the sky, including the new places we added. Let's do a separate hue and saturation on that. But if I choose an adjustment layer like hue saturation while I have something selected, watch what happens. Notice when it created it, look, there's a mask already associated with it, which has just allowing the change to happen in the sky. So you can see if I bring the saturation all the way down, it's only the sky that's affected or go the wrong way. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And I think I want it maybe a little bit warmer. I can adjust the hue here. Oh, that looks better. Just a little bit. That's good. And I could also do contrast, et cetera, et cetera. We'll leave it at that for now. So now let's look at the middle of the image. I love to paint with light. I love to do burning and dodging. However, you got to be careful that the thing isn't too bright. You can't burn something that's white. However, this grass is not quite white, so I think it will work. So this is a really cool way you can really paint with light on your images. Here's what you do. Create a new blank layer. You see this layer 2 here, it just has nothing in it. And what we're going to do is fill it with gray. But that's a preset option. If we come up to Edit Fill, where we were doing Content Aware before, now we have 50% gray as an option. So let's hit OK. And we get a 50% gray screen. You're thinking, well, that's not particularly helpful. However, what we're going to do is change this from normal to overlay. And what overlay does is, the way overlay works is it's a contrast adjustment blending mode. Anything that is 50% gray is transparent. It has no effect on the image below. If it's lighter than 50% gray, it lightens below. If it's darker, it darkens below. So as I mentioned, I thought some of this grass in here was a little too bright. So I'm going to put black in the foreground. I've got black there. And I'm just going to paint at 10%. So I hit 1 on my keyboard, and notice up top, it's changed to 10%. And my other mode here is normal. So I'm just going to start painting in here. And look how it just starts to get slightly darker. That really kind of solved the problem there. Is there any other place that's too bright? No, I don't think so. I think most of the other stuff I want to do is going to be lightening. So now I'm going to hit the X key and watch what happens between the black and white squares. They switch. You can do the same thing by hitting this double-sided arrow, which if you let it sit there, tells you X is switch. So where do I want the viewer to go? I want to help them along to the subjects. Well, I like this piece of wood here. So what I'm doing is I'm just painting with white here on this layer. Oh, this is already pretty light. I'll add a little bit more lightness to it, but I want to provide a path to it. So I'm going to take the grass leading up to the gas pump and lighten that as well. Where else? Well, I want to help the viewer get up to the mountain. This is a little dark back here. Let's get a little smaller brush. Gonna make this wood again a little bit brighter. And this 10% painting, by the way, is cumulative. I can keep going over it and it will keep adding 10% over and over again. All right, that's looking pretty good. I do see some more spots I want to darken. So I'm going to hit X. And I want to darken just below the mountain. And in fact, let's get on the peak itself, darken that red spot. Oh yeah, that looks good in there. And to add more to this, I'm going to hit X and put white, and I'm going to put some white on the brighter sides, the brighter features of the mountain, and here and in here. Now, does it really look like I've done anything to the image? Well, let's hide this layer that we just worked on. In fact, let me just make it normal so you can see that's what I just did. You can see where I painted light and dark. And the beauty of having this 50% gray is that you can see where you've painted and how smooth your painting was. When I see something like this, if I'm happy with it, I'm going to come back and I'm going to blur this layer to smooth the transitions a little bit. But let's set it back to overlay again. And I want you to see what happens when I turn this on and off. Watch with it off. Look at the difference in the image where you look. You see the difference? It's actually pretty amazing. It completely changes where your eye goes. It's all subliminal light painting. We've got the little bit of light coming from the bottom center that leads you up. We've got the lighter wood here. We've got a little path here, and the mountain has been added with a little bit contrast, a little bit of bright and a little bit dark, which makes you look differently. The bright parts here aren't such an eye catcher anymore. Now you go here, you go here, you go here, to the three subjects. Cool stuff. Now, as I mentioned, let's put it back to normal. I want to make sure that I don't see any transitions when I say if I was going to make a big print here. So what I'm going to do is go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And actually, that was pretty good. Maybe not quite that, because I can unblur it and I can start bringing it up. And I just want to see when these edges just start to fade enough. There we go, about right there. I've lost edges, and now I can set it back to overlay. To our eyes, is it going to look any different if I turn this on and off? No, it's going to look the same, but the transitions are softer and smoother, which allows us to do that. And we end up with a really nice image. So you see what's happened? We added more room. We just stretched the left of the image and the right of the image so that everything wasn't so close to the edges, including this fallen post on the bottom. We put a little more grass underneath it by making the canvas a little bigger and then using that content aware scale and one content aware fill on the bottom to make the image work better. We also, there's enough demos in this one particular image that we've just done that's going to keep you busy for hours. Let's go back to the zoom tool. I'm going to zoom tool, I said. Thank you. Go back to the zoom tool because I want to take a look at our cropping again. And again, notice that all of this stuff we've done up on the top, it says this is a 14 by 8.5 inch image. So this is perfectly ready to go out to my printer if I'm going to print on legal paper. I don't have the ability to set do virtual copies and set different crops and vignettes in Photoshop. So what I do was I'm going to make the image what I think is the best for what I need. If I need to adjust it a little bit, like for example, I already know that this image 14 by 8.5 by 8.5, the mat is actually 13 3/4 by 8. So it's going to take a little off the edges and a little off the top and bottom. So I knew I needed a little bit more room up top. So this is actually going to get cropped off from the mat when it gets framed. But again, even as I mentioned, I will save this in Lightroom. When I hit S, because I opened this originally from Lightroom, it's going to save it back to Lightroom. If I'm not using Lightroom and I hit Save As, then I just need to tell it where it's going to go. So for example, let's say I'm ready to send this off to the printer. Well, let's look at image size one more time. This is 28 by 17 at 240 dots per inch. Well, I'm only going to print 14. So I can hit, I'm not going to resample. I'm just going to hit 14. And you see now I have a 480 pixel per inch file to go out to my inkjet printer. Do I need to resize it? The answer is no. The printer driver will do that. The printer driver is not going to accept 450 DPI. It's going to throw out enough data until it can deal with it. And I don't know of any printers that are really comfortable dealing with anything more than 300 DPI. Can you cause a problem by sending too much dots per inch? The answer is yes, you can. Are you going to notice it in most prints? Probably not. But when you send a printer more than 300 DPI, the printer has to throw out data. It's going to have to throw out 180 pixels per inch on this image in order to process the file for printing. You might as well just resample for your printing or send it into Lightroom first, because when Lightroom sends out to the printer, it does that all for you. That's, again, one of the advantages of doing this stuff from Lightroom. Conversely, if I'm going to send this out to a lab, and let's say it's going to be a 28 by 17 inch print, that's okay. I'll just send them this file. So what I would do is just go to File, I'll do Save As, and I'll save it as a full-size JPEG. If it's going out to a photo printer, if it's going out to an inkjet printer, then I have to check the color space too. When we come back from our break, we'll talk about color spaces. But I saved this. So if I jump over to Lightroom, let's see, where'd you go? Should be in here somewhere. Oh, that was one I wasn't working on for today. I already hid this one. Let's see, that would have been, let's see if we go into the used file. There it is. It's actually, nope, not that one. Is it that one? No, that's before we saved it. Anyway, if I want to send this out to print from here, this is where I said some things are easier. And that's if I go to export and I just want to send it to my hard drive, I'll put it in a folder. I usually have a folder. If I'm getting ready for a print job, I have a folder called For the Lab sitting on my desktop. Overwrite without warning is a little extreme. Just ask me what to do. You don't have to yell. File renaming. If I'm sending out to a lab, I will rename to a custom name with the original file number. And the custom name will be Alt-G, which is copyright, Joe Brady, and then it will add the file number. The nice thing about this, I'm not that concerned about the copyright, but by having my name on each of the files, if the lab ever has trouble finding them, they know that my files have my name built into them. And then file settings. What file type do you need to send to your lab? Depends on where you're printing. If it's a regular photo printer, just a regular conventional photo print, then JPEG's fine. That's probably what they want. In fact, Vicky asked, is there a reason to flatten layers before you save or export as a JPEG? There is not, because a JPEG by definition has no layers. So the software is automatically going to flatten it for you when it exports it out. So if I'm going out as a JPEG, going out to the lab, I'm going to save it at 100%. I want the best quality it can be. The reason I would bring it down, if I'm putting something in my newsletter where you're just looking at it on the screen, I'll drop it down to 70 or so. But for the lab, it will be 100% a JPEG sRGB. If it's going out to an inkjet printer, typically they prefer a TIFF, and they want either Adobe RGB or ProPhoto RGB. That's between you and your lab. They will tell you. I think you're safe going with Adobe RGB. And that would be for going out to a large format inkjet printer. But again, if I'm having a photo print done, JPEG sRG 100%, I hit export, and it will take this file and it will send it out. And if I tab over to my desktop and hide other stuff, let me hide everything else. On my desktop is now a folder called For the Lab. And apparently I didn't have a name for this actual file, but there is my image waiting to go out to the lab. And back to Photoshop. Holy cow, it's 7:52 already. And
Before
yes.
we started, I also had the question of where you changed from save to the cloud to save to my computer.
Okay. Let's go back to there. Yep. Yeah. The question was how to get rid of this save to the cloud stuff. It's under settings, Photoshop settings, file handling. If you click on there, right here where it says default file location, every time Photoshop updates, it puts it back to Creative Cloud. Why? Because they want you to spend more money on your cloud storage. That's why. That's the only reason. Again, Vicky mentioned that she works this way because she works a lot mobile. The benefit of saving images to Creative Cloud is if you do an edit and then go look at your image on another computer or mobile device, it's going to be there. However, what if you have no connectivity? We find ourselves when we're out west, particularly you go to Monument Valley or something, there is no Wi-Fi. So you're going to be out of luck unless when you're in Lightroom, you create what's called smart previews, subject for another day. I prefer my stuff on my drive. If I need something to be in a Creative Cloud, then I'll just manually upload it. So what you do is change this to on your computer. As I also mentioned, I much prefer enable the legacy save as. Why is that there? Because everybody hates save a copy. Do you like save a copy, Nye? No, it's annoying. It's one of those changes they made that nobody likes, so that you can enable legacy save as. And what that means, one more time, instead of having to do save a copy to get a JPEG, which is what you have to do if you don't make that change, if you go under save as, under your format, JPEGs are back. Where if you don't make that change, in order to get a JPEG, you have to do save a copy, and it puts the word copy into the name. Annoying. Stop it. They're on my slap list because of that. All right. Anything I wanted to do? I think we've did a lot to this image. Don't you think? I think we're kind of good. One thing I have found that almost every image needs that's going to go out to print is a little bit of brightness and contrast added, because you'll always lose a little bit when you transfer to paper. Keep in mind that when you're looking at an image on your screen, you're seeing a backlit RGB image. When you go out to print, all of a sudden it's a CMYK image that's relying on reflective light to show you the colors. So generally, I will add a brightness contrast layer or adjustment to all of my images before going out to print. In Photoshop, if you go to adjustment layers, you see brightness contrast right up near the top. And I'll add a little bit of brightness and a little bit of contrast. And yes, tell me that doesn't look better already. Maybe a little more contrast to make the blacks a little darker, something like that. And again, yes, I have a calibrated monitor. And if I turn this on and off, you can see the before and after. See how there's a little bit more life. Now you're going to lose some of that extra life you just got because prints aren't as intense as a monitor, but it'll be pretty darn close. So that's something else I would do before sending an image out to print. All righty. Time to jump back into Lightroom. Any other questions while we're here? Okay. I think I got all the questions that people asked me earlier today. So I thank you for your questions. I appreciate that. All right, let's see. Oh, that's the stuff we did already. Let's go back to our new stuff. Oh, this one's going to take a little work. Okay. Another mountain shot. You guys tired of mountains? You want something else instead first? All right, here's your choice. You can, you can have a mountain or a mountain, but you can either have this one, which is number one. I'll give you that one. You can have that one, which we're going to edit, or, and this is called Twilight Peak, by the way. It's in just outside of Durango, Colorado. Or this one, which is Mount Moran on Jackson Lake in Grand Teton. So this is number two. The first one is number one. Type in chat real quick. Whoever gives me an answer, we're going to do number one, which is this, or number two. Yes, no, chat. Nobody, if you don't care, then I'll pick. Up one. Okay. Oh, got a bunch of ones. I got 1, 2. All right. So 2, 1 wins. We'll do.
Two.
Oh, I've got another. Frank, sorry, you were too slow on the draw there. But we're going to do both of them anyway. It just was which one are we going to do first? So here we are. This one has some issues. There are some things we need to do in Lightroom first, just for our basics. But one of the big problems is if we zoom in, we have power lines to deal with. You see them all right here? And they're annoying. They've got to go. We've got some other stuff down the bottom here. I don't know what the heck this thing is. This plant sticking up's got to go. I guess I'm okay with the rock. The road's fine. But the power lines are annoying, and they're across the entire image in busy spots. So they got to go. But that's going to take more than 2 minutes, and it's 7:58. So why don't we take our 5 minutes now? We'll take a break, and we'll come back and jump into here, because I'm going to have to pick up the pace for the second half because we've got a lot of stuff to do. So get up, get a drink. I'm going to get more coffee and be back in 5. Okay, let's get the show on the road. All righty. So a lovely spot. Again, one of my favorite mountains. This is called Twilight Mountain, just north of Durango. And what are the problems? Well, it's really desaturated. So let's fix the things in Lightroom that Lightroom does well. And it definitely needs some clouds. So first of all, let's do the basics. The shadows on the trees are really dark. So let's bring up the shadows. And I'm going to cut to the chase here. I'm going to add, let's see, what camera did I shoot this with? Nope, it's not showing up, which means I don't have a profile ready for it. We'll add vibrance and saturation. That's looking better already. The exposure is a little dark. So let's bring that up. And how do I judge exposure? Well, I look up at the histogram here. I can see I have a fair amount of room off to the right that's not being used. So I'm just going to bring that up. I don't want to take it all the way to the far right because that means pure white. Did I do that? Or did somebody else just draw on my screen? Let's see that. Where is that? Annotate more. Where do I turn off clear annotations? That is in here somewhere. Clear. There we go. Clear all drawings. Okay. I must have done it. Yeah. And again, the question also was about resizing in Lightroom. Remember that you do not resize in Lightroom. You resize on export. I'll show you that in a second. What else do I want to do here? All right, it needs some clarity. Oh, how come I have the annotation tool? Let me turn that off. Okay, there we go. I got my mouse back. All right, let's add, I'm going to add a little dehaze and a little bit of clarity. And I'm not completely thrilled with the color balance in here. Let's drag the main color sliders back and forth and see what happens. Too yellow. I think it actually needs a little blue. And then green versus magenta, it needs a little bit of magenta. And again, we went over the color balance thing in Photoshop last night. We may do one today also. All right, that's looking pretty good. We need some clouds. We need to do some things that we'll do in Photoshop. Let's send it into Photoshop. By the way, about resizing in Lightroom, that happens, as I mentioned, on export. And if I'm going to send this out to a lab and I want to resize, that happens right here under image sizing. And typically you need to know one size. So somebody mentioned about having 2000 pixel images. Well, I can say on the long edge, send this out at 2000 pixels. And I can also tell it the quality size here. So if I'm going out to an online print competition or something like that, 75% or so is fine. The resolution number right here, this 240, is absolutely meaningless. It shouldn't even be there. It's not doing anything. So don't concern yourself with it. If something is 2000 pixels across, it's 2000 pixels across. And we're not sending this in a Photoshop. This is to export a file. So this will create a 2000 pixel wide version of this in here. In fact, let's go ahead. I'm going to send it over and I'm going to call it resize in Lightroom, and we'll send it to that same to the lab file and I'll export it. So how big could I print this if I really only had a 2000 pixel file? Oh, let's see, 2000 pixels. What's the answer? Again, 150 is certainly safe. So 2000 divided by 150, 13-inch print. Could I push it? Could I get my legal size, my 14-inch print out of that? Absolutely. So that would be fine for a legal size print. All right, I still think the color's off, but that's not the problem. The problem is the stuff that needs to go, and that's asking too much for Lightroom to do. So let's send it into Photoshop with Command or Control E. And here it is. So first thing we do, duplicate the background so that I have an edit I can undo. I'm going to hit D just to put my colors back, and all the problems are down here. So let's just zoom into that part of the screen. And as I mentioned, that's got to go. So lasso tool, L, just drag around. I'm going to cut to the chase and use the keyboard shortcut. Again, I don't have to go to content aware fill. I can just go to fill. Now, if you remember last time we did that 50% gray layer, I need to change it back to content aware and hit OK. And that's gone. And I got an extra thing there. Well, that's going to go. So I need to do it again. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which on my keyboard is Function Shift F5, and that's gone. This thing, I don't know what it is. I find it a visual distraction. So I'm going to draw around it entirely and Function Shift F5 that, enter. So you can see I don't have to wait for menus. It just happens faster. Do you occasionally get a partial fail like this? Yes. So I got to zoom in down here. Is it a problem? A little bit. So stamp tool. Let's make it smaller. I'm going to work at 100%. And I'm going to pick up a little over here. So I hold down Alt. And I'm just going to bring that in. Okay. All right. I mentioned the power lines. And they're kind of across the whole thing. It's kind of annoying, but oh well. There's a couple of different approaches to this, and it's going to change depending on the real specifics of the image. Do I want to use the stamp tool? Well, I could. Let's just click on here, and I will come in here and just start painting along. And that failed right there. So that's not the answer for the whole thing. What else can I use? Well, probably the best tool for this. Oh, I'm going to say probably the spot healing brush, this one right here. Because what the spot healing brush does, I'll make it really tiny. And here's what I can do. I'm going to click at the beginning of a line. This is a pretty straight line down here. Hold down the Shift key and click and let it do it. And it will do a pretty good job. Then you just have to go back and fix. And I can just continue dragging across. Now there's a lot of these things to deal with. That's the problem. There's a lot of them. Let's go here. And I'm not going to make you sit and watch me do every one of these lines. That one was a complete fail. So sometimes that happens. Can I use the lasso tool and content aware fill them? Let's try that. In order to make the lasso tool straight and not click on the straight lasso tool, if I hold down the Alt key, it turns it into a straight line. And that allows me to just kind of follow along here, and I'll come down to the tree and then back. And then double click at the end. So there's the selection. Let's see Function Shift F5 here, how good a job it does. And deselect. And that was okay. But I think the answer is when you have something with this busy a background, it's going to take time. There's just no way around it. One other way you can approach this. I can get the stamp tool again, the clone brush. Where'd it go? Right here. And we're going to change a blending mode. Let's change it from normal. What's the problem with the lines? They're lighter than all the stuff around it. So if I change the tool to darken and then click, oh, say I'll click in here, hold down the Alt and sample from here. And as I come up, I can even come up from above. It's only going to change it if it's making the thing darker. Now that, in that case, that didn't work. But if I come and pick in some darker trees, let's say right here, and click on here, notice it leaves stuff that's lighter alone. So again, I don't want to bore you with you just sitting here watching me do this forever, but it's some work. It's when you have some lines like this. Now, if you have lines up against the sky, that's easy. That spot removal tool, this one right here, just let it settle over there so you can see it'll bring up supposed to bring up its description. The spot healing brush will do a great job on lines when they're in a sky. It has no problem with this, but this has got a constantly varying background, which is a problem. So I just wanted to show you some of it. I'm not, again, I did do it already. I have a completed one, but I don't want you to have to sit through the entire demonstration, but that's how it's done. It's a combination of spot removal tool or the spot healing brush, the clone stamp, and some content aware fill. And that's how I got rid of them all. It probably took me a half an hour, but I wanted the image, so it was worth it. Now I mentioned color problems in the foreground, but before I do that, this image really needs a sky. So here's another question. One you can ask in the chat room, 1 or 0. One is you want to see me put one of my skies in. 2, you want to see one of Photoshop's automatic sky replacement skies. Whoever chats first, 1 or 2. What's the answer going to be? 1, you want to see my sky. All right, I agree with you. Oh, and well, Paula, you were too slow with the trigger there. Yeah, I actually can't think of any of the Photoshop built-in skies that are going to be great. Now I could, rather than me selecting it, I could let Photoshop do a sky and then I could replace the sky afterwards. But that actually takes a lot of work. And when Photoshop has something like this tree with all these leaves behind it, it can be a problem. So let's see what happens if Photoshop selects the sky. Okay. Oh, okay, good. Paula, you redeemed yourself. Okay, so what happened? I must have had contiguous on because it didn't go in here. So let's do that again. Oh, it was the wrong tool. Duh. Magic wand. Wherefore art thou? Where'd my magic wand go? I was doing other stuff. Magic wand. There we go. All right. Deselect. Magic wand. 32 is the default. I want to turn off contiguous. Do I want anti-alias? This is really fine. I think the answer is going to be no. So I click down in the sky somewhere. It got pretty much everything in here down to the light parts. It missed some down in here and it missed the top. So all you do is hold down the shift key and notice it puts the plus to add to the magic wand. Gets the top. Let's zoom in. Oops. Let's zoom in and see where it missed. It missed down in here. So magic wand again, hold down the shift key. I will select in there and you can see it got all those little spots in between and it did a great job of it. It picked up some of the mountain. You see that right here? So let's zoom in on that. Some of the bright spots on the mountain. So let's get the lasso tool. And now we're going to hold down the Alt key. So remember, all these selection tools plus adds, Alt subtracts. So let's draw around there. I'll get that grouping. And I'll get this grouping. Now this is going to create a mask. I could also edit it on the mask, but there's a little bit of snow up in there. That's why I picked up the white. All right, so there's our sky. Before we do anything else, we save it. Select, save selection, sky. And enter. All right, so the request was one of my skies. Let's find a nice sky for here. Let's go to my clouds and skies folder. And let's get something appropriate for the mountain. Certainly not a beachy sky. That wouldn't make sense. And I think I want something with not a huge amount of clouds in it. Oh, let's see. How about, let's try that. Let's try this one. Let's send that into Photoshop. Command E there. All right. So I'm going to select all and copy. Command C, and then go back to our image, which still has our sky live. So we go to Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into. Because remember, when I hit copy on that other image, it's sitting on the clipboard waiting for something to do. And I hit paste, and there it is. And obviously the colors are wrong. Let's hit Command 0, or let's hit Command T rather, to resize this. And let's zoom out. Hit the Z, get our magnifier. Hold down Alt, and here's our sky. Let's get the V tool, which is our move, and see if there's sky that's going to work. I think so, but we need to resize it. So Command T. And again, the beauty of skies is you can resize them. And let's say I want to put the clouds up in there. But before I put it over here, I'm going to drag over, because remember, I want the color to be kind of close to the original. So I'm going to get the zoom tool and zoom in on the interface. Here's our old sky. Here's our new sky. All right, we did this last night, but this is an important one, and this is something unique to Photoshop. So let's go to channels. In fact, Diane said she watched this and she tried it and she failed. So here's what you do. Click on red and hit Command or Control L. That will bring up the levels. It is also under Image Adjustments Levels right there. We're just cutting to the chase using the shortcut. And we get our levels menu, and I'm going to bring it so that the word levels is right underneath our change here. And I'm going to click on the middle slider and drag it left and right until our new sky pretty much matches the old one. Just about like that, and that looks good. Okay, so we hit OK. Hit green, same thing, Command L. Middle slider so that this matches. Again, I like to squint at it so it goes fuzzy. That's good. And then blue, Command L. And this one's going to go the other way. And if you go too far, you can see it starting to show up. So you know it's in between there somewhere. And OK. And then we click back on our main. Now, there was a different gradation in the previous sky. That's okay. We just wanted to get something that was the same tone. So now we hit Command 0. And let's minus out of here a bit. And Command T. And let's put our sky back to where we wanted it. Oh, what do you think? Ooh, how does that? That's kind of nice. In fact, I even want it a little taller. So that's the beauty. I can hold down the Shift key and stretch it in one direction. And then let's see. That's too much sky. That's too much clouds. Just a little bit of clouds to break up the sky a bit. I think something like that. And if I want this clouds to be even subtler right while I'm here, I can bring the opacity down a little bit just to make it subtle. Now, I'm not thrilled with the color of the sky. Even though we made it match the sky before, I'm not thrilled with it. So let's do a color balance adjustment. I mentioned I wasn't thrilled with the color in this image overall. Let's zoom in to a piece of it. And again, here's what we do. Midtones. Let's just drag it back and forth. Does any of it look better? I find it easier if you hit a bunch of one, a bunch of the other. One looks less bad. In this case, cyan looks less bad. So that means it needs a little cyan. I think just about that much. Same thing, a lot of magenta, ooh, a lot of green. A lot of green looks less bad. So let's bring it down to 10 or so. Yellow, blue. This is a bit of a subjective call depending on the mood you're in or what you're after. I think a little bit of blue, but that's a tough call. Highlights, lots of red, lots of cyan. Need some red in the highlights, just a smidge. Magenta green. Oh, definitely needs magenta. Yellow blue. Oh, I think it needs yellow now in the highlights. Why has my mouse stopped working? There we go. And then lastly, shadows. Red. Ooh, cyan looks a little better. Green, magenta. Magenta looks better. And then yellow, blue, yellow. All right, so let's turn that on and off, and we can see our before and after sky. So let's look at it at 0. And now all I'm looking at really is the sky. I don't really care about the foreground because that's going to get its own color balance. So in order to fix that, I hold down the Alt key. Remember, we had a mask on our previous layer, which is right there. So I just hold down Alt and drag it up to this one. And now we're just affecting the sky. See that? It's not touching the foreground. So now let's do the opposite. Let's do another color balance. Same thing. Now I'm more interested in down here. So I'm going to select a bigger piece so I can see more of the foreground and do the same thing. Now I'm looking in here. I don't really care about the sky. Magenta, cyan, maybe a little cyan, but that's minor. If no matter what you do, neither of them looks better, that means the balance is okay. Green, magenta, need some magenta. And by the way, this is something that comes with a bit of experience too. Oh, definitely needed blue. That's a bigger one. Highlights, magenta, red. And if you prefer, you can drag back and forth and see what looks best. Definitely needs a little cyan. Magenta, green. Yeah, this one's kind of a tough call. Maybe a smidge magenta. Blue, yellow. Blue, yellow. Need some yellow. And then shadows, same thing. Red, cyan, red, cyan. Little cyan. Magenta, green. Magenta looks better. And yellow, blue. That's a little tougher call. That's somewhat flavoring to taste. And let's go back to 0, Command 0, and see how it looks. Yeah, it does look better. It's a little dark. We need to lighten it up, but color-wise, it looks a heck of a lot better. So I'm going to Alt drag our sky mask in, which is now applying it just to the sky, because here's what we have. I'm going to hit Command I to invert that into a negative. And now when I turn this on and off, you can see it's just affecting the foreground. And while I'm here, let's go to our brightness contrast. And we'll add some brightness and some contrast. But I don't want it to affect the sky. So how do I do? I just take our previous mask again, hold down Alt, drag it up, and it leaves the sky alone. And here, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have a bit of a tug of war on this too. Sometimes you're going to see it and realize, well, now after I adjusted the foreground, I don't like the sky color. So you can always go back, because since this is on a layer, this is Photoshop's version of non-destructive editing. So I might decide, I look at that and I say, well, no, it's too cyan. Oh, that looks better already. What happens if I add a little more blue in there? And let's add some contrast as well. So I'm going to do a brightness contrast on just the sky. Let's add a bunch of contrast. Now I'm trying to ignore the foreground, bring up the brightness a little bit, and then I will take our foreground mask, Alt copy, and there we go. So here's all what happened with all of our color balance edits we just did. We took it from there to there, and I think it looks much better. Now, keep in mind, some of this stuff is subjective. What I like might be different than you like, but I'm still not done, because what am I going to do with this? Well, it's going to go back into Lightroom for its final crop. In fact, let's just send it there. I don't need all these layers anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten it. Keep the file from being ridiculously large. Hit Command S to send it back into Lightroom, and that's where my final crop will happen. All right. Spent more time on that than I wanted. Let's move on. Let's go back into Lightroom to pick, before I miss out on it. Where'd my reeds go? Let's get the reeds, because they're kind of cool. We're going to do so. This is more designy kind of thing. All right. Okay, we got reeds. And I just thought it was interesting. I like the centered nature of it, and it's almost, I don't know, kind of triangular. But if I hit the crop tool, I get to see my golden ratio, and it's a pretty nice golden ratio in here too, slightly off centered. So I think what I would do finally is I'd probably go right to there to put this thing in the center because it's a mirror reflection. Yeah, this is a problem. That's a problem. We'll fix that in Photoshop. But let's do what we can here real quick. Let's bring up the exposure, the shadows rather. Let's add a little contrast. I'm going to add a bunch of saturation and vibrance, a whole bunch. And let's look at the exposure up here. In this case, I'm going to bring the highlights up. I want the highlights really bright here. And do I want color temperature? What do I want? Maybe a little bit of blue, a little bit more blue like that. And maybe a little more exposure. I think that's looking good for how I'm seeing it. The rest of the stuff I need to fix in Photoshop. Let me hit this again. And you know what? I'm going to send the whole thing into Photoshop and make that determination after we're in Photoshop. So let's send this into Photoshop. Command E. And here we are. Again, first thing, Command J to create a background copy. And we're going to go right to the lasso tool. And I'm going to drag around this stuff up there and just use the keyboard shortcut, Function Shift F5 for content aware. Hit enter on that. Let's see how good. Perfect. That's gone. When we get this thing down here, that's just a little annoyance. That should be an easy one. Function Shift F5, enter. So you can see once you learn this keyboard shortcut, it just makes things so much faster. All right, so what do we want to do with the image? How can we make it more interesting? The grass looks great. Let's take a look at hue and saturation here. Let's see what happens with the saturation as we bring it up and down. And yeah, the grass looks better with some saturation. Not sure if I like the water as much, but let's go ahead and put in a lot for now. Let's put that much in and hit enter. Command 0 to see the whole thing, and we can turn this on and off. And if I decide I like the grass, but not the background, well, we can select that. Let's go back to our layer, get the magic wand, and I will turn on anti-alias this time. Click out in here, and it got everything except down the bottom, so I hold down the Shift key. And there we go. Now, it picked up this other grass in the background. But that's okay because we're not getting rid of anything. All we're going to do is mask out the hue and saturation change. So with that selected, if I click on here, actually I want the inverse of that, but just leave it here for now. I put X in the foreground, so it gives me black. You hit X, click on the mask, and Alt Delete will fill that mask with black. So if I deselect that and click on the mask with Alt, that's what we just ended up with, which, by the way, in itself is kind of a cool thing. And before you ask, can you use that as an image? The answer is yes, you can. You can actually make that your image. I don't want to, but you could. All right, so we've got that going. And now you can see, I turn this on and off, the saturation is just happening on there. And I can also decide I want to make it a little brighter. Let's try brightness contrast on just the grasses. So if we add some brightness and some contrast, now that affected the entire image. And you know what? I'm not hating that, but maybe not quite that much. So I'm going to Alt copy my mask in there. And then notice there's this properties. If you double click on the mask right here, I can change the density of the mask. So if I bring the mask down to 50%, and click on it with Alt, you can see it's actually making the mask lighter or darker. So I can pick some kind of intermediate mask. It doesn't have to be 100%. And I think I'm liking that. Pretty happy with it. What else do I want to do with this? Let's get a little bit creative. I'm going to hit Z with the zoom and Alt to bring it out. And I'm going to add some canvas to this, but I'm just going to use the crop tool. Oh, and I still have my ratio. I don't really want that. what I can in my ratio is I can just hit space bar to get rid of that, and then drag. And I want a bit of a border all the way around. And you're going to find that unless you're going for a perfect frame size, which we'll deal with later, what looks right to your eye is right. Because your eye is very sensitive to these kind of proportions. So if I do something like that, now I have this interesting white border. But what else might I want to do to this? Well, let's go back into Lightroom because I have a sky somewhere near here. Yeah, let's open this one. I'm going to send this into Photoshop. So just Command E, and here it is in Photoshop. I don't want to crop it. I want all of it. So Command A or Control A gives me all of it. Command C to copy it. It's now sitting on the clipboard. And I go back to my brush here. Command V. I'm just going to paste it right over top of the thing. And obviously I need more. So I hit Command T, which again is Edit, Free Transform. And I can pick where I want the sky to be. Actually, I kind of like the left side. And I'm going to scale it up and down, including off the screen because we don't need those rocks there. And yeah, I think something like that. I like that. That's cool. All right, so I hit enter on that, but that's not what I'm after. I don't want this just to be on top of it. I want to take the texture of it. And I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to overlay. And I'm going to bring the opacity down a little bit. I like that. Yeah, I like it. Now, I don't necessarily want it to come 100% through the middle here. I like it everywhere else. So let's do something. Oh, one other thing I'm going to do. I'm going to put a white background behind this whole thing. So let's create a new layer. Put it underneath. Actually, I'm going to put it underneath our grass. Hit X to put white in the background and Alt delete to put white in there, just so I actually have stuff here. So with this cloud layer over top of it, I'm going to click to add a mask, get a brush. I'm going to work at about 40%. Make my brush a little bigger, but very soft. And I'm just going to start painting in the middle here. Basically, that's taking away the cloud effect just in the middle of the image. And if I turn you can see here what I just did. That's all I just did. But now we've got the clouds through there. And I think that looks pretty cool. So certainly different than this thing we started with. Just got to create something a little creative with it and go to full screen on it. And it's nice. Is there more I could do? Yeah, I could make the clouds come over into the white a little bit and have that fade off. But again, a subject for more for another day because I got to keep moving. I told you guys I'd try to get 4 demos in the second half. I think I'll pursue this one. I'm going to record this one separately and show you some more stuff. But until we do, go over the portrait. Let's get to the portrait before I forget. All right. Again, here's our buddy Kendra. And this was shot with no flash. This was intentional for a demo. I would usually use fill flash here. So we ended up with some problems. Let's do our basic edits. I'm going to bring the shadows way up. I'm going to bring the overall exposure up a little bit and add some vibrance and saturation. Don't hate the color temperature. Let's bring that down a little bit. I'm looking at the background. I'm not even really looking at her. Now the background's okay, but her skin tone is really off. Now her eyes have some light because we actually had a light out here, but the shadows here are off and her skin color is off. So this is something I'm going to do in Photoshop. However, one other thing I want to show you in Lightroom that is an option. Sorry about that. When you're dealing with skin in Lightroom, if you want to soften skin in Lightroom, but we're going to take it in Photoshop and do it a different way. But if you didn't want to, or you didn't need to, get a brush with auto mask on and just select the skin. Try to leave the teeth and the eyes alone. I'll get her shoulder here. Hands not going to really apply, the ones that are in shadow. Here's the tool. Scroll down to texture, add somewhere between 20 and 40 points of texture, and you're going to be done. Look what, here, I'll show you on and off. Here's a lot of texture on the skin, and here's none. And notice how it smooths the skin. If I could find a way to hook up electrodes to Lightroom and have this do this in real life to all of us, I'd make $1 billion. But unfortunately, it doesn't exist. But anyway, so that's how you could do this in Lightroom. But we're going to go in Photoshop. So Command E to send this image into Photoshop. And here we are, Command J. All right, so I mentioned the skin tones are off and the smoothness of the skin is off first. What's more important? Let's get the color right first. So again, I'm going to zoom in. You want to see the skin better. And we're going to do that color balance thing again. Color balance. And I'm just going to eyeball this. What is the problem? Yeah, it's a little too reddish yellow. So a little cyan. Magenta actually needs a little green. Yellow, blue. Let's do highlights. I'm just kind of eyeballing this as we go along. Very minor here. Add a little bit of warmth. Let's go there. You can see I'm barely moving the sliders here. And there is some subjectivity here. Bring that up a little to warm. Magenta needs a little green. Yellow, blue. Shadows need a little blue. Okay, so here's what we just did. By doing that, the skin tone looks better. However, we've ruined the rest of the image. It really was just your skin looks better, but the rest of the image is terrible. So here's what we do. You get a mask with any kind of adjustment layer. Fill it with black. I have black in the foreground. Alt delete to fill the mask with black, which undoes what I just did. Then I get a brush. And I want to be able to fit in between her eyes. So I'll make it smaller than her eyes. And I'm going to work at about 70%. And I hit X to put white in the foreground. And I'm just going to start doing this. And as I do it, I see I've overdone it. That's okay. Stay with me. This lets me see what I'm doing. So I'm just painting in the spots that are here. I'll get these shadows. Her far shoulder is fine. And I think I got everywhere I needed, except I made the color change was too much. Now I could go back into color balance, or nope, I do that. I have to Alt click on the mask, and you can see those are all the spots I did. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blur this. Gaussian blur. And actually that's a good amount. But then I need to bring the levels of the mask down. Oh, yeah, you've all seen levels. And you know that on an image that this thing will lighten and darken. Well, we're not after that. We're after the one underneath, and that's called output levels. And what output levels is going to do is it's going to say, well, right now black is 100%, white is 100%. But the output levels are, what if I want to say the brightest white is going to be maybe 70%? So I bring down the output levels, and that turns all my whites gray. And hit OK. And now when I turn this on and off, you can see it just took some of the little supernatural saturation out of her skin by just having a minor change there. So let's hit Command 0. What else is going on? What are the other issues? Let's create a stack of this, which is hold down Alt Merge Visible. What else is going on here? The brightness contrast is off. Gee, what would happen if we change the blending mode of this one to soft light and then bring the opacity down to 20% or so? And we turn that on and off. You can see it just add a little depth to the image. And then the overall brightness contrast needs to come up. So let's bring up the brightness. Actually, I want to bring down the contrast. This is one I don't want more contrast. I want less. And let's see where we started and where we are. Yeah, the skin looks a lot better. Oops, I just painted where I didn't want to paint. Skin looks a lot better. And again, you can see when I turn that on and off, her skin was just a little too, I don't know what the color is, but the color is off. But by just bringing down some of the saturation of just her skin. Now we have one other thing going on right here. Her knuckles have gone very bright. And I showed you the burning and dodging thing before, but you can't burn or dodge white. How do you do that? Well, let's go to levels. We'll do a levels adjustment layer. And here's that levels thing we were just dealing with. And again, everybody's used to dealing with this thing. Drag it left, it gets lighter. Drag it right, it gets darker. Well, that's not what we're after. We're going to bring down, put that back to 0. We're going to bring down the output levels again. Because what that's going to do is make the brightest thing in the image, instead of being 255, it's going to be down to about here. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the top of her hand. I think about right there. Yes, does it darken the rest of the image? Absolutely. That's okay. Because we're going to fill this with black again. Hit X for black, Alt Delete. And then we're going to get our brush, put white in there, and I'll work it to 40%. And I'm going to just start painting a little bit over her knuckles just to take that out. And by the way, normal is just going to darken it. Well, what happens if I go to luminosity? What's the difference between normal and luminosity? What luminosity does when you make a brightness change is it just changes the brightness without affecting the color. It is pure luminosity. If you do it normal, it will affect the color as well. So is there more I want to do here? Yeah, probably. I want to do a crop change and add a little bit overall saturation to this. So let's send it back into Lightroom. Again, there are certain things that Lightroom is better at. So let's send this back. Come on, finish saving. And there we go. Back into Lightroom. And here's our new one. And it looks lovely. Oh, I forgot to show you something. I'm sorry. Back. We're not done yet. I mentioned her skin. Yes, you can edit the skin in Lightroom, but Photoshop gives you some other cool stuff. So let's hit L, the lasso tool. And I'm going to select any blemishes, however minor, but basically ones that cause a shadow. And we'll deal with the chin because they cause shadows. I would say just that. That's all she needs. And I need to come back to the layer with the actual image on it. And we're going to use Content Aware Fill. Just hit Fill, Content Aware. And in one fell swoop, all the blemishes are gone. I can turn them on and off. You can see that quickly. You just select them all, they're gone. But here's the other cool thing. I'm going to duplicate this layer. And this is my favorite skin softening thing, particularly if you have somebody that's really got skin problems. Go up to Filter, Blur, Surface Blur. And this is my default numbers. Actually, 1424 is my default. And there we go. Now it's going to do it. We see as I hold it, it shows you what it's going to do. And it's really strong. That's okay, because we're not going to work at 100% when we bring it back. But if you're going for really old-fashioned, really soft focus kind of thing, you could do it here, but you're going to see it's going to make a bit of a mess of the image. Bear with me. Let's see. That's okay. So you see it's got really, really, really almost cartoony, and it's a look, but it's not what we're after. So we add a mask to it. And by the way, if you want another shortcut, if you're going to need to mask something and you want it to automatically fill with black rather than having to go get black and fill it, hold down Alt when you select Add a Mask, and it automatically fills the mask with black. Just a little shortcut. So now I'm going to get my brush, and just like we did before, we're going to paint the blur back in. And let's just start with 30%. And I'm just painting with white over the skin. And look at how great that looks. I tell you, if I could come up with digital makeup, I'd make a fortune. Look at how it just smooths the skin. By the way, if you ever photograph someone and they were freezing and they've got goosebumps, this will get rid of goosebumps. It's really a cool effect. And a little smaller brush through in here, just to smooth that out. And gorgeous. All right, watch this. I'll turn it on and off with that. See how it's a subtle clean? It looks like just somebody spent more time on makeup with her, and that was it. That is a really cool effect if you need to do skin retouching. Whoops. If you need to do skin retouching on someone, even from a distance, I turn this on and off. You can't really see it as well, but it is a beautiful effect to create great looking skin with basically your added makeup. There we go, before and after, but it's not overdone so it completely looks fake. And after you've done it, if you think you've overdone it a little bit, you can just bring the opacity of the layer down a little bit, and that will let some of the pores and imperfections just start to show through what it was you just did. All right, let's save that again, put that back in the Lightroom. And one thing I made a mistake on when I took this image was I tilted the camera a little bit too much so that the posts on the wraparound porch are a little too extreme in their angle. So let's back off here. Let's hit R. I'm going to eyeball what I want to have as my rotation. Do I want to completely straighten it out? Maybe. Let's see if we completely straighten that. Takes a little of the motion of the shot away, but I think I can live with it. So let's just add a little bit of overall saturation and vibrance. Let's put our vignette in. And again, I want the viewer to go here. So we're going to do something that used to be a big thing in Photoshop called creating a facial mask. I'm going to hit Shift M, which is the radial gradient, and do a radial gradient over her entire face with the biggest part of it, the strongest part, centered over her face. And we're going to open up the exposure here a little bit, bring the highlights down just to help the viewer get there. And then if I decide down here is a little bright, M is our linear gradient. Let's bring down here. I'll bring down the exposure just a touch, which again will add some focus to the image. And as I'm looking, I think I want a little more on my vignette. I think I want a little heavier vignette there. And there we go. And I'm going to take our original one and reset it so we can see the before and after. So we started out with this, took it into Photoshop, fixed the color, did some digital makeup, and re-rotated the image and took it over to there and ended up with a beautiful image. Any questions about that? No?
No questions about that. John actually sent a private message wanting to know how long the video recordings will be available.
Oh, how long will the video recordings be available to you guys? Months. They'll be up there. I'm not going to be in any hurry to get them down. So you can actually watch them online, which I don't recommend. Just download them. Once you download them, you have them forever. So if it's 3 years from now and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't sleep, you can watch these. And after 2 hours of it, you'll be back to sleep. All right, let's finish up. It's 8:53 and we still have puffins to deal with. So let's get to the puffins. These are puffins on the Isle of Staffa off the coast of Scotland. Best place on the planet to go watch puffins, because when you show up there, they come to see you. And to prove that, check this out. I took a picture of one of the guys taking pictures of puffins so you could see the way it works. This is an uninhabited island. You take a little boat out there, there's 30 or so people on it. You get off the boat and they say, okay, walk to the other end of the island. There's a little orange cone there and sit down. Don't stand up, sit down, and the puffins will come to you. And sure enough, I mean, you can see, look at them all there. And just to show you how close they come, here's a guy taking pictures of the puffins. So they literally, there's nothing you have that they want, but they're very curious and they come to see you. It's hysterical and it's the greatest experience. And we will be visiting with the puffins again this July when we go to Scotland. So we've got some cool little puffins here. Let's hit some basic edits first. The shadows are a little dark. Actually, the whole exposure is a little dark. Let's look at the histogram. Yeah, I didn't want to blow out any of the plumage. So I played a little extra safe. Let's bring the highlights down and bring that up. Color temperature looks a little cool. Let's add a little bit of warmth to it. And let's add some vibrance and saturation because they are very colorful birds. And okay, we're looking better here. What are the problems? Well, the birds themselves need a little bit of work. Going to do a portrait edit on the birds. And we have a little bit of distractions. This one right here, I think has to go. And there's a piece of one behind this bird. So let's send this into Photoshop. All right, so here's our image in Photoshop. Command J for our background. And let's start right out with the lasso tool and select this critter back in here. And let's see if function Shift F5 or content aware will do the job for us. I can live with that. That's pretty good. And there's a little bit of distortion going on. Actually, no, it just picked up an extra. It picked up this thing. So let's get the stamp tool. Make it a little bigger. We just want it to set it to normal. And I'm going to work at 100%. Alt to sample. I want to sample, obviously, from the ocean back here. And the little stuff came out into the ocean there. I mean, the thing's out of focus, which makes it really forgiving for our edit. So while we're here, we've got this one here. So this one, let's get close. We've got a little leaf coming, a little piece of grass coming out of this puffin's head. So let's get right close. I'm just drawing down here, just enough to get rid of this other puffin. And let's try that again. I don't know if this one's going to work. We might have to do this more manually, but let's go to fill content aware. And yeah, complete fail. So that's not going to work. However, by having this sampled, we have a mask to protect. I'm going to zoom in more. I missed a little piece here. So I'm going to get the lasso tool. This is at 400%. So I'm going to add this spot that I missed right along the side. Whoops, I did the wrong key. I forgot to hit plus. Let's hit plus there. And I also got a little bit of the eye, so I'm going to hit minus for that to bring that back. I don't want to lose any of that. And again, we're looking at this thing at 400%. All right, so let's back off to 100%. Actually, let's back off, way back off, because we need to find some other grass we can paint in here. So we've got stuff right here. Let's try that. Let's get a nice big brush. Hit Alt to sample right here. And let's come in right next to that. And actually, oops, I got extra. So again, Alt. Let's get rid of that. And now let's deselect so that we can fix any borders that we created, which we did. A little smaller brush, and let's just clean up our borders that we added. And again, like I said, the beauty of this is it's out of focus. So we can just get rid of stuff and it doesn't matter because it's out of focus anyway. Oh, I missed getting rid of that piece off of the top of the head. Let's zoom in on that. Actually, it's gentle enough that I can get a brush. I'll make the edge harder so that it doesn't flow into the head. Little smaller, and Alt select. And let's just skim across. Oh, and what's interesting is it's darker over here. So what do we do for that? Let's come over here. Gotta make sure that the brightness levels are the same. So I'll make it a little smaller. I'm right up against the head, and I'm going to paint from either side. And this side is a little darker. So I'm going to reselect over here and bring my opacity down to 60% so that I can start blending. And again, remember when you do opacity here that it's cumulative. Now I need to soften the edge and hit Alt because I need to continue blending this so that this thing fades away. And again, this is one of those things that's easier to see when you back off on your zoom. And now I can see that looks okay. All right, so we got rid of the big problems. If I toggle this on and off, you can see we got rid of the problem birds. You might not like that, fine. Let's Alt click on this kind of slightly repeating thing over here and get rid of that. Okay, now let's deal with the birds. Can Photoshop pick out that these things are the subject? Let's find out. Select subject. Will it get one or both of them or neither? It picked up both of them. Great. We don't need this leaf here, so hold down, get our lasso and hold down Alt to draw around that and to draw around that. We missed a little bit of the bill here, so let's zoom in, get our lasso tool, hold down the plus, and I want to get all this in for the stuff we're going to do here. And let's subtract this. Again, we're going to be doing mostly brightening and darkening here, so this stuff is fine. Oh, and what we're going to do is this one, we're going to sharpen him. We'll do the color stuff first because he's a little bit out of focus, but not for long. We're going to be, he's going to be in focus when we're done with him. So I just wanted to have the two of these selected so that I could remember our overlay layer for painting light and dark. Let's do that. Let's create a new layer and X, I'm going to fill it with black. Whoops, that's not what I wanted, is it? No, I need to change it to overlay. Let's change it to overlay. Now, remember, if you remember first time I did this, I changed it to gray. I filled that with gray. I don't have to do that because I can see what's black and white here. So that's an optional step. That filling with gray is just so you can see where you painted lighter, because if you don't fill it with gray, you can't tell. All right, so let's get a brush. We're on overlay, remember. I'm going to get a brush, about yo big. And I typically like to work at about 10%. So 1. I think the top of the heads are a little bit too bright, so I'm going to paint down their backs and on the top of the head to add a little bit of darkness to those black parts and through the body as well. Now let's hit white. So I hit X, and now let's paint with white on the faces. It's almost as if I had a speed light with me. This is kind of more what would happen. And let's come in a little finer. I'm going to brighten this up a little more. I'm going to go to 20% down here just to speed things up. There we go. All right. Yeah, I like it. Now these eyes are both kind of dark. So let's zoom in. Let's zoom into the faces. The eye is a little dark, so let's get our brush again. Make a little tiny brush. Now we are brightening, so let's go up to 50% and see what happens. And because we want it to look natural, but I want it to be brighter. There's one exception. You see there's a catch light right here from the sky. So I'm going to go up to 90% on that to bring that out. Oh, that looks better. And same thing with this guy. Catch light nice and bright there. I'll come down to 40% for the rest of the eye. And then back to 0. Yes, love it. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to deselect the puffin on the right because he's nice and sharp. So I hold down the Alt with my lasso and deselect him because he needs to be sharpened. So I'm going to select back to this layer and copy and paste him. So now I have a layer with just him. And this one I want to sharpen. So let's go up to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. So I'm what John asked, can I adjust the eyes in Lightroom also? Absolutely. All right, so Smart Sharpen. I want to sharpen up in here. See, there's that face. Well, it's going to need a lot. Let's see, how sharp can I get? Actually, that looks pretty good, and I'm way up. See, I was at 170% or so. I'm going to come up to 400%. Let's see if I bring the radius up. That's too much. And again, I can click on here and see the before and after. And look how sharp all of a sudden this is with these settings. That looks great. So let's hit OK. And now our out of sharpness puffin is now sharp again. Now I also want to separate these guys out of the background again. I should have saved myself some time and saved it. But since it was able to find it, let's go ahead and select the subject again. Oops. Select subject. All right, I want to do a slight color adjustment on these guys to have them stand out. So let me deselect these plants. And as I'm looking at them, the background, the green is very yellowish kind of green. How can I make these guys stand out a little bit? Well, that's by changing the color temperature. So let's do a use saturation. Let's see if we change the hue a little bit. And you can see we can make them redder. Oh, somehow I lost one of them. That's interesting. That's not going to work. Okay, there we go. Actually, let's do a color balance. I think that's going to be better. Color balance adjustment. And I'm going to put this up on top. So if it's over top of everything, and I can make them a little bit bluer is what I really want. Just a little bit of blue, which will make them separate out from the rest of the image. And yeah, pretty good. So let's take a look, see where we went. That's where we started. And they look even like they need a bath. They look a little dirty. And we made them much brighter, got rid of the distractions. This is the ocean back here, by the way. And there are some other things I'd like to do, cropping, etc., and maybe change that green a little bit. Better done in Photoshop, or Lightroom rather. So let's save this, send it back into Lightroom to finish up. So we tab over to Lightroom. Here's our new set of puffins. Let's hit R to crop. We'll figure out what the crop's going to be in a second, but let's take a look at the colors. Let's go to HSL. Let's see with the green what we can do. Which way do we want the green to go? I think a little greener, but not quite as saturated. Let's bring the saturation down. That looks more natural. And let's select this background. Let's see if Lightroom sees that as a sky. What do you think? Will it work? Nope. No sky here. Fine. Let's get a brush. Got a brush on auto mask. I'll just get a nice big one. And we'll paint across here. I think that should be a little bluer back there. I mean, it is the ocean. So let's add a little blue. Yeah, it's better. And then you have to decide what's the crop. What story do you want to tell? I kind of like the fact that these little guys are off in the back there. So let's see what we can do with the crop and not lose all of them. I think I'll take that one off at the edge, come in from the top, come in from the left a little, and then add a vignette. Oh, and Frank asked about, can I adjust the eyes in Lightroom also? Yeah, let's do that while we're here. Let's zoom in way in. Let's go to 300%. Let's look at the eyes. Let's get a brush, K. We actually have a lot of cool stuff we can do in Lightroom, and this is generally where I prefer to do this. So a nice small brush. Auto mask is on. And let's see if I wanted to even change the tone, the color of the eyes a little bit. Let's bring up the brightness here a little. And can't remember what color their eyes are when they're out in the sun. I don't know, more yellow or more blue. I'll make it a little bit more yellow. And then come over to here. And this one got noisy. Well, again, we're looking at it at 300%. but we can still adjust that. Let's make this guy's eyes, we'll make it like that too. Add a little green and take out some of the red. And hit done. And let's go to detail. And add some noise reduction. Oh, speaking of noise reduction, as long as we're here, let's do this. So let's go back to our full screen. And you can see when at 100%, you don't really notice any of the noise. And he's already nice and tack sharp, or she, I don't know how you tell on Puffins. But if you have an image that you think is about ready to go to print, but you've got some noise, two things I'm going to do. I did my vignette already. I hit Shift M to give myself a radial gradient again. And I want to, again, help the viewer get to my subject. I'll bring this in a little bit from the side. A little bit rounder. Just to there to help you get to the puffins. And I'm going to bring up the exposure, but bring down the highlights because I don't want the whites to get lighter. I'm also going to bring up the saturation. There we go. All right, so a filter that I haven't shown you before, and it's not a lot to see, but if you have noise, there is some noise that's not offensive in here, but if you get the Nik tools, if you go up to edit, yeah, hold on, let me get out of that. Whoops, what did I just do? I rotated the photo. If you go to photo, edit in, there's another Nik filter called Define, and yes, with the Lightroom adjustments. It is, to me, like the most amazing program for getting rid of noise. It just analyzes the photo. Yeah, there are things you can oh, it didn't like this file. Never mind. I think I need to check to see if there's an update. All right, forget I showed you that. All right, so anyway, where's the image we started with? Here we go. We go to full screen. There is our raw file after our initial edits, but look what we were able to do to bring those puffins out, add some sharpness to the one on the left, get rid of the distraction behind, and you kind of get the sense that there's more of a group of them here now. And it's interesting. I don't know if they're different species or variations, but notice that this guy has yellow around his eyes and this one has orange. So interesting. Don't know what that's all about. All righty. Did I get through everything? I didn't do one. There was one more I wanted to do, and it's already 10 after 9. Any questions? Questions? I still have more stuff to share with you, but keep watching for Photo Friday. There's going to be some more edits in there. In fact, tomorrow's Photo Friday has a really cool tool in the latest version of Lightroom when you're stitching together panoramics. That same tool can also cause trouble. And it's going to cause some trouble. And I'll show you next Friday how to get rid of the trouble.
It's a very important day on Monday.
And it's an extremely important, all right. I didn't realize this. Diane found this out. Tomorrow is a very important, our Monday is a very important day. March 27th is National Joe Day. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have a coffee with Joe because it's also Cup of Joe Day. I actually found a video that goes over these National Day things. And there's a video on National Joe Day and what it means and where it came from and how coffee came to be called Joe. So I think it's appropriate that it's on Monday Morning Coffee Day. So I put a little note about that in Photo Friday tomorrow, and there will be a National Joe Day video in Monday Morning Coffee. So important day. Have a coffee with me. All right. Any other questions? No, nobody has questions. You guys, your brain's full. Okay. Everybody's brain is full. So I'm going to stop the recording and I will get to editing them as soon as possible. But once they're done, go ahead and download them. You will have them forever. And yeah, there's no limit. And if for some reason something happened and after several months we finally take them down and you lose it somehow, I will always have a copy of it. So just send me a note and I'd be happy to send you a new copy. There's no expiration date on any of these videos. All right, so that's it. I thank you guys so much for joining me. We did cover a lot. I did pick up the pace a lot in the second half because I really wanted to get through those demos. So actually, let me unmute if anybody if anybody wanted to. How do I unmute all? Can you unmute all, Diane?
They might have to unmute themselves.
Okay, well, I unmuted you guys. If anybody wants to say anything, you can now unmute. And
Thank you very much, Joe. I mean, it was really helpful.
great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you felt it was worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining me. And I liked we had a smaller group actually in the live. I'll admit the vast majority of people who were joining us are just getting the recordings after the fact. But you do get to ask questions. You do get to steer where we go. So I appreciate you joining me. And we'll pick up again. I'll probably not do one again until next spring, but there's going to be a bunch of new stuff coming online. And as far as new courses that won't be presented live, that'll just go, in essence, direct to video. So I'll let you know when those are available as well. So again, thank you. I know I'll see some of you in Florida at the Florida Fest. And as always, if you guys have any questions, send me an email. I'd be happy to help you with stuff whenever. Just don't send me a text. Because if you send me a text, you're never going to hear from me. I hate texting. But send me an email and I will get back to you. And if I'm not quick enough, call me. You guys see my newsletter, you know if I'm traveling. So if I'm in Europe, I'm not going to, and it's 6 hours different, you better not call me at 2 a.m. But other than that, I'm always available for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free anytime. I appreciate you guys spending the time with me. And you guys are why I keep doing all the newsletters and all, because you're getting something out of it. And I appreciate that. So that's it. Thanks again. Have a great weekend. And I hope to see you guys live in person one of these days before too long. So everybody have a good night and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.